All right, good morning, everybody. We'll get started here with preventing equipment fires during harvest season. Appreciate all of you joining us. My name is Kurt Lanzone. I work for Purdue Extension as an Ag and Natural Resources educator, and I'm located here in Park County, Indiana. Talk about how we can prevent equipment fires during harvest. Some keys to prevent and harvest fires: we got to have some prevention that takes place, some preparation, and then we also need to have an action plan when it does occur as to what we can do. Some prevention: we're going to try and reduce the chances of ignition. We're going to focus on service and machine hygiene. We're going to remove residue and dust in a timely manner. We're going to look for lines that have rubbed or gotten frayed, electrical lines and belts, things that are out of condition that we can fix ourselves or have the dealership fix. Another thing, we can check our bearing operating temperatures, make sure those are within specifications. Another good thing to practice using a lot is the battery isolation switch. That way we end those circuits being energized after we walk away from the combine. Residue reduction. Just need to develop a system and types of tools you're going to use to remove as much dust and chaff and residue as possible. A lot of guys like to do the top-down method where they'll start up at the top, deploy the ladder on the combine, spray off everything from the top and work their way down. Some guys will start at the front and work their way to the back. Just trying to remove as much of that debris as we can. A lot of different things you can use. A lot of these handheld blowers are pretty powerful now and can remove a lot of the debris itself. A lot of guys still use, compressed air from an air compressor on their service truck. Just depends what options you have available. One key is just to make sure, that the machine was fairly clean to start with, had a good bath from a pressure washer, trying to remove built up grease and oils. Visual inspection: we can look all over the combine. There's lots of moving parts, lots of hoses, lots of belts, lots of chains, electrical lines, wires. Most of the electrical is encased in a loom, so we can look at the looms and make sure those are intact and make sure that animals hasn't gotten into them or they've rubbed up against something. So we can see here, got, on the feeder house of a John Deere combine, looking at it, making sure that belt's good because it's got a lot of material that can build up on it. And then the other part we're looking at is on this Case IH combine, all the hydraulic lines that are going, fuel lines, you can see a lot of different things going right here. And it's just important to have a good visual inspection. And in order to do a good visual inspection, it needs to be fairly clean. That way you can look for things that aren't normal. Temperature checks. A good tool to have on the farm is an infrared thermometer gun. These things are really nice because they can check operating temperatures of different things, hydraulic lines, bearings, clutches, different idler pulleys. You put that dude on there and spot check it, and it'll tell you what the operating temperature is right then. Most of our operating temperatures on our bearings, we're going to want those under 200 degrees by far. There's going to be some increase in temperature, whatever, over ambient temperature. So you have to take that into account. But if we get too much hotter than 200 degrees, the grease that you used in the bearing itself is going to break down, and that's going to lead to premature failure, which can also add heat, which can be an ignition source for the chaff itself. Just a good tool to have on the farm. They can be bought fairly cheap and be very effective in helping you prevent breakdowns too, as well as fires. Mentioned battery isolation switches. Most combines now manufactured have a battery isolation switch built in. You can add one in. It's not as big a deal as people make it out to be. They're fairly inexpensive. One thing good about those is it's going to cut all the battery power up to the combine from the battery location. That way you don't have to worry about any faulty circuits, causing a short while you're not in the machine. Preparation. Need to make sure extinguishers are serviced and mounted. Make sure you got a communication plan in place. And what do I do if I suspect a fire? Who do I call first? What kind of actions do I take? One of the big things, we see combines, if an operator does have a little fire, that they're slow to get them put back on the machine, or maybe they forget about putting them on the machine altogether. Good key to have is replacing or having backup extinguishers in place on the farm. That way, if you do use one, you can put one right into service. We talk about extinguishers and, how long are they good for exactly? Do I replace them every year? Do I replace them every 20 years? Do I just replace them when I trade equipment? Good thing to look at there. OSHA has some test standards that they give. Most dry chem extinguishers need to be professionally serviced every 6 years. Most of them have a lifespan of 12 years. Different types of extinguishers have different lifespans. And one of the keys there is to have a relationship with somebody that can professionally service those and take care of your business, your farm business. There's also extinguishers that are not refillable. Most of those will have a plastic head on top, and on the gauge itself, it'll say replace after it's been discharged instead of refill. If you look at the indicator gauge there, once you use one, it'll tell you. And it's important to have them serviced annually, by a professional. That way you have that relationship to start with. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money, and then you make sure that all the extinguishers on the farm are in service and ready to be used. Communication. I know here in Park County, we have some areas that fields are not covered by cellular communication. So how are you going to get the call out that you're having a problem? Well, a lot of farms here still have two-way radios. You got to have somebody else there that can answer the two-way radio, while you're there. If it's somebody that's just in the semi, they might not be able to hear you because they're clear over at Dana, dumping a load. So it's important to have contact with somebody. The good thing is most of the time now, seems our cell service here in the county's improving. So lack of cell phone service should be minimized compared to what it has been in the past. How do I tell if my machine is having trouble? One of the key indicators on combines is usually you can smell them. May not be every pass, that you're making in the combine, but if you got a pass where you have a tailwind and it's blowing smells out of the combine, it can blow them into the cab. If you're going into the headwind, sometimes it's hard to smell those. But usually a good indicator is you'll start to smell that telltale burning chaff smell. It's something that draws your attention, and then, it's a time to take action then. Well, what kind of action are we going to take? One thing a lot of people talk about is just exit the machine right then. That's probably the best thing to do, because you don't know how big the fire is, whether it's rolling out the back of the combine. Did somebody call you and say, hey, the back of the combine's on fire? What's going on? One thing to remember is to call 911 first thing. Try to have an idea where you're at. That's one thing we'll talk about here in a second. Do I need to make calls to my hired guys or my family to help get extra equipment there? Because I am a long way from the firehouse. Always consider, life safety as your first priority. That's the biggest thing. If something catches on fire, make sure everybody's out, make sure you're away from it, before you even attempt to do anything else, because maybe you're not physically conditioned to climb up and down, ladder on the combine back and forth, multiple times, and try and extinguish the fire. One thing, want to exit the machine safely. We want to make sure we shut the machine off fully. We don't want it running. Sometimes that can help lead to bigger problems if we jump off the machine and it's still running. It could be adding air to the fire, making more fire growth happen before we even get a chance to get off the machine. Call 911 first. That's one of the things mentioned a second ago. Always know, a location where you're at in reference to, major streets, major roads, major highways. Sometimes the dispatcher may not know what your back 40 is, but all of your, family and hired guys know what the back 40 is, where the dispatcher that you're calling into 911 may not necessarily know where the back 40 is at the McGuire farm. I know a lot of people think that the fire departments know where the McGuire back 40 is, but they may not know as well. Have turnover rates in the firehouses. Some of them don't know locations other than based off of what the 911 maps are going to give them. And that's a key, is trying to have a good 911 location, a 911 address that's going to get us close for the fire departments, to respond. A lot of times if we have a combine fire, maybe it's not a big combine fire. Maybe it's just some chaff smoldering and you need some help from the fire department to get some extra water there. And, they're driving down through there. They don't see any smoke, so they can't find you. So some good directions help a lot with that. Using major streets, that's the key is, 1 mile west of County Road 800 and then 100 yards back through the field. Another thing that's important to tell the dispatcher is whether or not the field is able to be driven in. A lot of fire departments won't take apparatus into fields unless they know it's safe. Not going to get stuck. Years like this, it's not as big a deal because it seems that everything's dry and drivable. Where, last fall, there was some issues with stuff getting stuck. So one of the big keys is knowing what condition the ground's in, if you're going to get stuck or not. Another key is, are you catching the field on fire? Is the field starting to burn? Am I going to need additional resources, from family, from friends, neighboring farmers? Is there a call that the dispatcher can make for you, to get a piece of tillage equipment up there to help stop the spread of the field fire that's expanding? Always approach with caution. Access panels can fan the fire or introduce additional oxygen as you open them. Know if there's fuel suspected to be involved or what fuel. If it's just chaff and electrical wires, I'm going to pick the ABC extinguisher, the dry chem extinguisher that was mounted on the ladder rack. If it's just chaff that's burning, maybe a pressurized water can take care of it. And then I can refill that back at the shop after I get done. Trying to know what fuel it is without opening it makes a big difference. Always open cautiously when you open the panels. Like I said, it can introduce oxygen quite rapidly to that and can be bad for the spread of the fire. Has the fire spread out into the field? A lot of times if the fire has spread and we have dry conditions, it can spread rapidly with the wind and the dry matter in the field and the relative humidity being low. Those can all compound to make it where we don't have ability to use water to stop the fire. A lot of times tillage tools, it's a good idea to keep a tillage tool hooked up, in the barn lot if you got an extra tractor. That way if something does happen, you can help put out the fire and keep it from spreading into unharvested crop or neighbor's unharvested crop. Just trying to protect, what we haven't harvested, protect the crop. If I'm trying to do all this, running around, like trying to put it out, trying to make phone calls, trying to contain stuff, am I out of breath? Am I feeling ill? Am I exhibiting signs of, heat stress just from that? A lot of times these fires happen, when we've got really nice weather out that's, bright sunshine, a lot of heat. It can really affect you pretty quick when you were, sitting in an air conditioned combine cab just riding, and, all of a sudden your heart rate jumps and, you're called to action to do something. So, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Don't push the issue, because your life's more important than the combine. That's for sure. One of the big things I want to leave you with is, if you do have something, to take away with you, don't park a hot machine in the barn. If you pull up into the barn after the end of the day and think, oh, I'm just going to park it in here because there's a chance of rain tonight, or that's probably not the best idea, because a machine that's hot still has the potential to catch on fire. Let the machine cool off, then move it into the barn. Try and prevent 2 insurance claims from happening there. If you catch the barn on fire and the combine, a lot of times there's other contents in the barn that can catch on fire, and we want to prevent that from happening. So I'll just leave you with that. Just please don't park the combines in the barn or the tractors right after they've been running hot. There's still buildup of materials on there. We don't want to cause more harm to more of our property than what we can. That's the biggest takeaway. If you guys have other questions, just holler at me. I'll be more than happy to help you guys have a safe and fruitful harvest season. We hope that everybody takes care. And if you need anything, just call me in the office, 569-3176. Thanks.